Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Kalki Presents My Indian Life, brought to you by the BBC World Service. Thank you for those of you who listened to our first episode on our incredibly charming male belly dancer, Ishan Hilal. And now this is really important. I need all of you to share what you think of us on social media. Tell us what you think and also your stories. But in the meantime, here is episode 2.
What happens when the curtains go up to reveal a young woman standing stark naked on a stage?
Many people look at me. Many people don't look at me. Many people look down, look here, look there. Some people will happily look at my entire body and be unabashed about the fact that they are looking.
Theatre actor Mallika Taneja uses her body as a tool to make a point.
I'm standing there with my body in the nude to say something.
From the BBC World Service, this is My Indian Life, the podcast about what it means to be young and Indian in the 21st century. I'm Kalki Koechlin, and I'm so glad you've joined us for our brand new series focusing on stories of grit and determination, about how we deal with some of the issues many of us face day in and day out in our lives as young people in India. If you are young and Indian, then this is really your podcast. And this is episode 2, A Body of Protest. Welcome back. If you haven't listened to the first episode yet, don't worry. This one will still make sense as I have a completely new story for you. But do go back and listen to the first episode if you can. It really was quite an interesting story. And please do let me know what you think of this podcast. If wherever you're listening allows you to, please leave comments and rate us. And tweet us at BBC World Service or go to the BBC World Service Facebook page. Use the hashtag #MyIndianLife. I really do want to hear your thoughts and suggestions, so don't hesitate. We've had so much reaction to our first podcast. Thanks to everyone who's got in touch. I'll be talking to some of you about your stories and thoughts at the end of this episode. Today's story is about a clash between traditional beliefs and women's aspirations for freedom. It's about one woman's fight against gender inequality. At the same time, it's the story of a society in churn. India has lately been in the news for stories of violence against women, and not without reason. A rape is reported every 15 minutes, a case of domestic violence every 5 minutes, and street harassment is rampant. As women, most of us have our stories of when we were groped or harassed on the bus, or when a man passed a lewd remark or made an obscene gesture at us as we walked down the street. It has also happened to me countless number of times. There's one anecdote that happened to me very recently. I was riding my motorbike in town and I got stopped by cops. And, they asked for my license and my insurance and all those things. And they didn't recognize me immediately. They thought I was a Firang. And then after some time, they realized it was me. But they were like, Madam, आप तो Indian हो, आप ऐसे क्यों जा रहे हो? मतलब छोटे-छोटे कपड़े में जा रहे हो? Like, how come you as an Indian, you're traveling like this on a bike with sleeveless shirt and, with the sun beating down on you? You cover yourself up. And I mean, they were saying it in a very sort of friendly way. But, the undertone of that is very much that, this is not our values. But that's what almost always happens in a patriarchal society like ours. And it's often the women who are blamed. Some of the questions we're asked by the police, politicians, parents and guardians are, why were you out so late? Why were you out with a man? Why were you drinking? Why were you showing your cleavage? And such conversations almost always end up with the same advice I was given, be a little careful. This type of behavior has come to be known as victim shaming. And it's something that actor Mallika Taneja confronts in the most direct way possible in her play, Thoda Dhyan Se. Be a little careful. Before the curtain rises, audience chatter fills the auditorium. And then suddenly, there's pin drop silence. No one is moving. On the stage, under the glare of bright lights, stands Mallika, completely naked, staring at the audience. A few minutes of uncomfortable silence later, she smiles. And then she begins to talk, first slowly and then more and more animatedly.
And it's not that difficult, You just have to follow some
rules. Like, I come back home by 6 o'clock every day, every evening. And if I have to go out after 6 o'clock for some reason, then I always go with my brother. And if my brother is not available for some reason, then I go with someone who's like my brother. And after dark, I don't take the shortcut. I always take the long cut. And if you don't give people an opportunity to say something, they won't be able to say anything about you.
As the monologue progresses, she starts putting on clothes, adding more and more layers, even wearing a helmet at one point, all the time explaining to the audience that as a woman, she has to be a little careful. Mallika first performed the play 5 years ago, soon after the December 2012 gang rape and murder of a 23-year-old physiotherapy student on a bus in Delhi and the gang rape of a photojournalist in Mumbai a few months later. There was, quite understandably, massive outrage over the incidents. Sex and sex crimes have long been a taboo in our society. So when sex attacks and rapes become topics of living room conversations, it felt like this might be a moment of meaningful change. At the same time as this Delhi gang rape, I was in Delhi workshopping for a film called Margarita with a Straw, and I remember being extremely disturbed by this case, extremely uncomfortable and shocked at the violence of this case. And, you know, it affected me, and it made me think about what is our role as women in this society, and, you know, how much do we all need to talk about it on a daily basis. And I think that's really the beginning of a lot of the work that I've done as well. And I realized that I wasn't alone, because there was massive outrage over the incidents. And for the first time, it felt like there was the start of a shift in attitudes. Mallika describes the first time she performed the play.
So the first time, I really wasn't sure what this meant. I just took a risk. I was prepared to fail. Both times I went into it saying, what's the worst that can happen? It won't work. I'll come back home. Life will go on. Just said, okay, let's do it. There was no doubt in my head that I am going to do it.
So she did it. But when she started, she used to begin in her underwear. That itself was unimaginable, she says, and it was unfathomable to go beyond that. But a year and a half later, when the piece got invited to the Zurich Theatre Festival in Switzerland, she was asked about the underwear.
A lot of questions were posed of the underwear and the beginning, and I had no answers for it. It didn't work anymore, like it wasn't relevant anymore. The biggest question was that now that you have the freedom to be on a stage without this layer, what would it be? And there was absolutely no doubt, like it was a obvious sort of answer that the underwear just had to go. You know, that if this piece were to find its real feet, it had to be from nothing to everything, not from something to everything.
In that initial reaction, did you feel judgment? Did you feel different kinds of attitudes coming out?
In general, there are these kind of reactions that come. Many people look at me, many people don't look at me. Many people look down, look here, look there. Some people will happily look at my entire body and be unabashed about the fact that they are looking, which is very refreshing actually. But I think one very sort of common feeling that I get from every time I do it is a very, very strong sense of camaraderie in that first 8-10 minutes. I don't feel judged about my body.
Mallika has performed Thoda Dhyan Se nearly 150 times. But being naked on stage can still be an unnerving experience. A lot, she says, depends on the audience.
I've never felt threatened, except once in Paris, where I had teenagers in the audience who giggled and giggled and giggled and giggled and giggled. Oh my God, it felt like half an hour and I couldn't start the piece. And they were just so embarrassed of a naked body staring at them that they didn't know what to do. They looked here, they looked there. Some girls just looked behind and they wouldn't let the show start. And that has been the most humiliating 20 minutes of my life in the theatre. But apart from that one incident, I have found great power in the first few minutes of the piece. I have had the good fortune of witnessing journeys in the audiences. The moment I begin to smile after looking at everybody for a while has always been a moment of relief, love, comfort for a lot of people in the audience. And there is this sense, especially with women, of, yeah, we know. And there's just this connection that kind of happens, and then it flows. And when that connection doesn't happen, I know that show fails for me, because that's like it's like my trigger point.
I'm also kind of curious about the men in the audience, because, I mean, as a woman, I completely relate to first the vulnerability of the body on stage, and then also the weight of what we have to be or pretend to be, or these roles that we play. So I wanted to know, are there any distinct male opinions that you saw come out?
I have a lot of men in my audience who appreciate the piece for what it says. I think the piece has led to conversations amongst them with their female friends or whatever it is around all sorts of things like consent and safety and whatnot, So, but I do remember this one discussion session after my show, which I like to call it the wallet versus the vagina debate. So
right.
Men are thinking about safety in terms of mugging or getting beaten up, whereas women are thinking about safety in a very different way. And there was a big debate about how safety is also for men. Of course it is also for men, but I guess in order to understand where I'm coming from, we need to take it a step further and say, okay, let's see what happens when you go to the police station when your wallet gets stolen, and let's see what happens when I go to the police station once I have been groped. And then we have to understand what the difference is between your meaning of safety and my meaning of safety.
What do you think of the fact that some people find this element of nudity very offensive? Do you think any part of you was worried that you are shocking your audience or trying to get a reaction through the shock element?
I can understand discomfort. I don't think I understand offense. I understand that nudity confronts you, and it can make you, and it does make people extremely uncomfortable, as it has made me also very uncomfortable. Offense I don't understand. I am not standing there as a body to offend. So if they are taking offense, then I suppose the question to be asked is why? I think there are things that we need to be offended by. We need to be offended by the naked body that we find raped and murdered. That is offensive. But I'm not standing there to offend anyone. I'm standing there with my body in the nude to say something. And my intention is very clear. So I'm not there to shock. People do get shocked. But when you present something that has an element of risk, it brings about all sorts of reactions. And because I'm aware of the kind of reactions it can bring, I also give it the time that it does get. A lot of people become comfortable. A lot of people ease up. They're not so shocked anymore.
Thoda Dhyan Se is not for the faint-hearted. There are places that are squeamish about nudity and venues and theatre fests that won't allow her to perform. Mallika says many festival organisers expect to see a performance video before finalising their programmes. This is something she is not comfortable with. She's always worried about her video falling into the wrong hands or being leaked on the internet. So the discussion generally ends there. Her actor friend Shena Gamat says initially, even Mallika had an internal debate over her motives.
I think one of her struggles that I do remember her questioning herself about, am I doing this for shock value, or is there a real reason to do this? And it really bothered her because she knew instinctively that why it was required and that it was required. And when I see that piece and just the vulnerability and the sheer political statement of that naked body, of course the piece can't be done any other way. What I love about Mali is that she constantly questions herself, just questioning whether what she's doing is really honest and true. And it's when she realized that it really was, that I think then it became relatively easy for her to do what she had to do, maybe not so easy for others to accept.
It may not be for some, but despite the nudity, her family has watched it and accepted it. Theatre is in Mallika's genes. Her father, Mallika Taneja, is an award-winning actor. Mum, Saraswati, who died when Mallika was 10, was also a theatre actor and an accomplished singer. Her sister, Suhasini, says Mallika was always a performer.
She's never shied away. I don't remember her shying away when she was a kid. We used to have all these chatis and aunties and all who used to come to our house when we used to have dinner parties. And so we had a harmonium at home. And it was mandatory that for an hour, Mallika will climb on the harmonium and pretend to play it. And we had this book of Hindi hymns from school, and she used to sing it page to page, and everybody had to listen. Nobody could escape it. What I'm saying is she was always a performer. I mean, that is something that's always been there. It's something that she's always spoken her mind. Audiences have always listened to her, whether out of force or out of choice. As kids, we were very different. And then, our mother passed away when we were very young. And that was a drastic personality change for us. She became quiet or whatever, so she had to be pulled out of her shell.
When Mallika was about 13, their father enrolled her in a theatre workshop at the National School of Drama. After that, he says, she was a different Mallika. There was a lot of change in her. She became confident. I was surprised, he says. Starting from the time she was in college and did a play about incest, Mallika Taneja has watched everything his daughter has done. He says if the play did not contain nudity, it could have reached larger audiences. But, he says, he is very impressed by Thoda Dhyan Se.
So I'm really proud of her. जो मैं 45-50 साल में नहीं कर सका, इसने इस थोड़े से ही टाइम में कर लिया, अचीव कर लिया, जिसके लिए मुझे लगता है बहुत कन्विक्शन और बहुत गट्स, विल पावर की.
So what he's saying is that he has been acting for 50 years, and what he couldn't do in that time, she's done in such little time because she has the conviction and guts and the willpower. He says he's not saying this as a father, but as a theatre person.
It's not really easy, and that too independently, akele, without any support.
Independence is a word that describes Mallika well. At 34, she's unmarried, lives on her own, and travels the world with her show. I, too, have a similar lifestyle, and I come across more and more women like us in big cities. But we are still quite rare, as most unmarried women continue to live in their parental homes. But despite our fiercely independent existence, can we ever stop looking over our shoulders? Can we ever stop being a little careful? Not really, says Mallika.
It's not as though just because I do this piece and I've kind of reached a certain place in my head or that I'm not careful. It's not possible, because I don't think you can rid yourself completely of the need to watch out for yourself, because we need to watch out for ourselves. How can I tell a mother not to tell her daughter to be careful? I don't know what it is to have a child. I mean, it's contradictory sort of situation, because on the one hand, I truly believe that if we tell our daughters, just be, not be careful, just be. If we start changing the conversation, won't it eventually change our minds? But we don't live in a society that will allow the daughters to just be. So in a sense, we have to be willing to actively deal with the contradiction and risk that contradiction. But no parent wants to risk anything for their child. Neither do we want to risk anything for our own bodies. So yeah, we do take precaution. We are cautious.
We do take precautions. We are cautious. But things can and often do still go wrong. And life can seem like a constant battle.
So when I was younger, of course, there are people who have grabbed your breast and touched you here. And then I think it took a while to understand that, oh, this is what happens. And then you spend the next few years just elbowing them and just shouting at them or covering yourself and wearing your dupatta on top of your kurta and, all of those things that we do. But recently I was at a physiotherapist, and in an attempt to release my shoulder, he released my entire breast, And I was shocked out of my wits. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe how shocked I am this is happening. I can't believe that till today I haven't said anything. And I know that I shouldn't let it just pass. But I can't begin to tell you how much of an effort it is seeming like to tackle this now. After all the tackling that we do, I feel I will tackle it. But I really felt exhausted. And I felt angry that I have to deal with this again. And I felt angry that I finally found a physiotherapist who was it was working. I felt annoyed and I didn't find the energy to take it up. And I said that, okay, if I can acknowledge to myself this touch was wrong, I will deal with it. Right now, my life has to go on. Then I am not disempowered in any way. I am not weak. I am not caring. I am not choosing not to say anything. It becomes even more tiring when this sense of duty and responsibility sits on your shoulders with it. Because you're right, you can't fight each and every one of them. Sometimes you just don't have the time. Sometimes you're tired. And we have to acknowledge that many times we also don't care. Because we are people with our ebbs and flows and lives and ups and downs and abilities and lack of them. And that has to be taken into account when we are talking about movements or changes. Especially for me, because my tool for it is the arts. And I feel like the arts has the ability to acknowledge individuals. Whereas political movements necessarily acknowledge and speak to groups. Right? In which the nuances of the individual are lost. But that's not where I stand. I kind of stand in a different vantage point. I think anything that we do out of a sense of heavy responsibility and duty only breaks our back eventually. We have to also grow stronger, in the journey so that we can be the agents of change that we want to be. I think we need to be a little kinder on ourselves also.
So, is there any hope for India? Mallika says there's no real substantial change, but what is heartening is that there is a change in attitude. At least there are more conversations on subjects that until recently were regarded as too taboo to address. And taking control of conversation is the first step to the country becoming a better place for women. Thank you so much to Mallika for sharing her story with me. And I'd like to hear yours too. As a young woman in India or a young man, what are your experiences of gender stereotypes? Our email address is myindianlife@bbc.com. My Indian Life from the BBC World Service is all about being young and Indian. And I want as many people as possible to join in and listen to my podcast. I'm relying on you to help me spread the word. How about telling 3 friends about us and show them how to download or stream the podcast? It's really easy to download a podcast or audio streaming app on a smartphone or tablet and then to search for My Indian Life. So please show everybody how to. If you can, subscribe to the podcast. It's free and it means you'll get every episode automatically. In the next episode, how does a man who struggles to speak find his voice when he sings? Don't forget our hashtag MyIndianLife. Tell us what you think. Thanks for listening.